Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome. So, first things, actually, I'll just give a little bit of a warning. I've noticed in the chat we've got some spam happening. Please don't click any links. Don't go off. I haven't shared any links. They're nothing to do with me. I can't seem to delete them fast enough. So, don't click any links, please. Okay. And today I'm joined by an immigration expert, Alessia. So let's just get her in here and she can introduce herself. So here we go. Hello, Alessia.
Buongiorno, hello everyone. This is Alessia speaking. How are you today, Sean?
I'm good, apart from this little
issues we're
spam
having.
situation, which I've just explained to everyone. Don't click any links.
No, exactly. We're the true ones. So just stay here. So
exactly.
As you introduced me, just saying to anyone who is watching that I'm a lawyer in Italy, and so I work as an immigration consultant too, focusing on immigration matters, and basically I assist people who want to move to Italy for some specific reason, maybe work reasons, family reasons, just pleasure because they just fall in love with Italy, and then I support them with immigration procedures, which also involves real estate and for example, property purchase or lease agreements, which are rental agreements as well. Because I know there is a little bit of misunderstandings when it comes to lease agreements, rental agreements, but that's your field of expertise. So in any case, that's what I do every day. So I hope we can have a nice chat today about that and what it takes also for immigrants to move to Italy on that side.
Fantastic. Yeah, as I was saying to you before we came in, so for me this is an interesting one because I don't have to pretend to be an expert or to know much about this, and I'm looking forward to learning a bit. I do have experience of it. I have pre-Brexit experience, so I have the experience of being an EU citizen moving to Italy, and now that's not the case.
No, but still, it was actually. So your very personal experience, I think it can add a little bit to the our conversation because of course you are an immigrant too in these terms.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and interestingly, you mentioned that I hadn't even thought about that. My personal experience as well was probably exactly what you shouldn't do, and that is, yeah, exactly what you shouldn't do, and that is just go without doing any research or planning, or this was my. I mean, if you're an EU citizen, you have that privilege. Really, you can do that to a certain extent, can't you? You can go to another EU country and kind of worry about the details later.
You have time to think about that. You still have some fulfillments that you have to comply with, but still, if you are no longer an EU citizen or not a EU citizen, yes, it's we can take you as an example of what not to do and why it might be important to refer to a lawyer.
It's a different situation when you're a non-EU citizen moving, isn't it?
Definitely.
So, yes. Sorry, just before I get started, then on the first question, I'm just making sure. I just want to check the comments again because my comments are not coming through to StreamYard. So if anyone has commented, I haven't seen your comment because we seem to have technical problems. No comments. We just have a lot of spam comments again. Okay, never mind. Okay, so let's start with that then. Let's start with these common issues. So, well, what would you say then, first of all? Because as I said, I can list the common mistakes I think people make, especially when they don't think these things through. But today's focus is more about people who are planning, people who should be planning, and what real estate agents can do to help their clients. So, what mistakes have you seen agents make, Alessia? What's a common thing that people do?
Yeah, a very, very important mistake that actually real estate tend to do, even if not really, maybe it's not their intention, but still it happens quite a lot, is to sell a house, for example, or in any case, get involved with foreigners about real estate topics and suggesting to the buyer that it will grant them a visa, which is not what happens. If we are talking about, for example, well, more than for example, if we're talking about non-EU citizens, that's something that cannot really be done, saying a house is going to grant you a visa, because this does not happen in Italy, and so it may end up very badly. I've seen, unfortunately, quite a few cases of people that were not planning things ahead, as you said. They just came to Italy, purchased that specific house, planning on staying with the family, children, enrolling children in schools, getting involved in the society, buying cars and everything. And in the end, they were illegal migrants, so they had to leave, which is not really an ideal situation, an ideal scenario if you're just moving overseas, for example. So the bad mistake here, sometimes happen on purpose, sometimes, or at least I try to hope that it's not on purpose, but still it happens a lot that real estate and immigration are not overlapping things and are not always aligned. So very important thing is to make sure that you are compliant on both sides. And so maybe touch base with I'm not trying to sponsor myself. It's just to make sure that you
No, you
if you
are.
are
That was the
non-EU.
point. That's the point. Remember, that's what you're allowed.
Well, still,
You're allowed to sponsor yourself on your own stream. That's fine.
yeah, sure,
You know.
but still, maybe it's not myself, maybe it's someone else, but it's very important, because I don't know if you have had any of these type of situation, like people asking you if the real estate purchase was granting them any type of visa, maybe.
Well, I've talked about this issue a lot with clients, and it's something I have noticed most clients want to get more informed on. So most of
Okay,
the
which is good. I mean,
agents, most of the agents. I mean, obviously the agents. Obviously, I like to think the agents, the people I work with, these are people that want to improve themselves. They want to attract more clients. They want to become more professional. Is
of
how they
course.
see learning English. So, but yeah, often they're not experts on this. They're not ignorant to the topic.
No,
The people I work with,
maybe it's
but
just
it's amazing to me that people. I mean, I have heard horror stories from other people that they have been
okay,
misled by some people.
exactly.
It could not just the agents, but other people along the line. And it sounds incredible
Might
to
be,
me that people.
of course.
It just sounds incredible though that people would go as far to get set up their life and then find
Definitely.
out. But I
No,
imagine that sounds, from how you're speaking, it doesn't sound like that's a rare occurrence. It sounds like that has
no,
happened more
unfortunately
than
not.
once.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't really thought about that before, because also it depends, I guess, on the type of person you are. Like, if you are really an organized person and you try to set everything up front, or you're just one of a different type of person that takes what it comes. But yes, unfortunately, I really was not expecting such a frequency in these type of cases. Or it can be the same with taxes still, but real estate happens because many people are just driven by the dream of making the Italian thing come true, and then it happens this way. But I'm not saying real estate professionals are the evil, but it's just that sometimes either on purpose or not, maybe they come across the topic of immigration, so selling and discussing, assisting a foreigner, and then maybe they are not totally prepared on this side. So really, not on purpose, not intentionally, but it may end up on an escalation that just ends up very badly, because of course it's not very nice to have to just leave away the dream you have, and also the house you purchased, car, life, and everything. So that's a very common mistake, actually, more than you would expect.
So we'll come back to the visa issue specifically. That's something I want to
Yeah,
ask you more
sure.
specific questions about the visas, but we'll come back to that. So just sticking with this idea of common mistakes and misunderstandings and things to think about. So apart from visas, is there anything else or what are the main areas that real estate agents should educate themselves on, in your opinion, when helping foreigners move to their country?
Yeah, good question. Good question. It also may depend on whether we're talking about a purchase or renting, so rental agreements, because of course there are different items and ways to comply or not. So in terms of a purchase, I think that one important thing to focus on is whether there is a bilateral agreement in place. We're always talking about two different nationalities. So I'm considering, for example, the Italian seller and property owner trying to sell something, a real estate property to a foreigner, non-EU citizen. Well, in this case, it's very important to focus on the existence or not of a bilateral agreement between the two countries of nationality. So something that is happening quite a lot is for Canadian people, because right now there was a restriction from Canada and the possibility for to foreigner to purchase a property, and so if there's no condition of reciprocity between the country of the seller and the buyer, then it may not be possible to purchase the house, so to sell if you're on the other side. So that's a very important thing to pay attention to, the existence of the condition of reciprocity in case of two different nationalities. This is not an issue if we're talking about EU citizens, because of course within the EU that's always met, a condition that is always met. But if we're talking about non-EU buyers or prospective buyers, then that's a very important thing to take care of and to consider, because it's not very known, very popular and common as a knowledge, but it's very important because basically in the end, if there is a purchase, a contract, it may be deemed void. So in the end, no purchase was done. So I think that's a very important thing to pay attention to. It's called a condition of reciprocity, so bilateral agreements between the countries.
So just to clarify, just to put it even in even more simple terms, Canadians cannot buy property in Italy at the moment because there is no agreement. There's not the correct agreements between the countries to allow it.
There are very few exceptions to these, but that's very exceptional thing. Other than that, of course, we're just not talking about Canadians, but it depends on those. But that's a very good example.
And would that be Canadian citizens or Canadian residents?
Yeah. Canadian citizens. There's also a condition in terms of residency, but that's mainly for nationality. So
even if you were, for example, a Canadian citizen who had lived abroad away from Canada for 20 years, if you decide you're going to, you want to retire to Italy to have your dream kind of, an Italian retirement, you can't.
Yeah, most of the times, then you're still blocked.
Yeah. I don't know if that's common knowledge. At least when you mentioned that to me when we were talking about this, that was a new piece of information for me. And are there any other major countries that are, when I say major, I mean large non-EU countries where large populations of people that might want to move to Italy are coming from?
That's a very good question. Actually, has not happened to me in terms of clients, because I normally have clients mostly focused on North America, Canada, Australia, and things like that. With Australia, actually, I think there are some restrictions that have just recently come into effect, but still, it should be still possible in terms of my knowledge. There is also a platform which is very useful to check out. It's on the ministry website, so there is a platform where you can see where you can check effectively whether the country of interest has a bilateral agreements in terms of property purchase, and so it's better just to check out that one. Canada, so Canadian citizens is the one that I'm more I have more knowledge about. That's what it is. For example, there's no issue with US citizens. But still, the condition of reciprocity as a quite wide range of application, and so it might depend also. Devil is in the details. So we're lawyers.
I've just shared the link. Hopefully that's gone through. If it hasn't gone through, then No, it's not gone through to LinkedIn. There is a problem today with the LinkedIn comments. I don't know why. I will share the link afterwards. I think I might have to go through. I will share the link. I will make sure the link ends up on the post afterwards in case anyone does want to check that website. Sure. It's not it's got a big map on it, so it doesn't matter if you can't speak Italian. You can work it out.
Exactly.
I mean, is that something? Sorry, just on this issue again. I'm just curious if you have any idea why, because it does seem a little bit strange to me that whole countries of people are. You hear all the time of things like, oh, I mean, Russia is just constantly sanctioned for everything, isn't it? Russians. If you said to me Russians aren't allowed to buy property, I would go, okay, I don't understand, but I'm not surprised. But this, but from what I've understood, I don't think Russians are sanctioned, are they? I think Russians can buy property in Italy.
They are, but not on this level. What I'm talking about is the condition of reciprocity does not just apply to property purchase. It's just a general institute, a general condition principle, if you want, that applies throughout the law and legislation. So it doesn't really matter if we're talking about real estate. It's just that is one of the points and topics that might fall within this condition of reciprocity. Is something that as a lawyer I've come through these type of issues many times, and not just because of real estate. So it's the same thing that is applied, for example, in terms of criminal law, civil law. So it really goes throughout any type of institute from a legal point of view. It also real estate falls within these brackets. So that's why it's not just real estate, it's not just property purchase. It's just that the condition of reciprocity is existing in international law. So it might be for family matters, family law. Also, that's also very important in terms of inheritance. So you see, also there's this general cap of the condition of reciprocity when it comes to bilateral agreements between countries. So in the end, it really affects everyday life. It's just that we're not very aware of that and how it works.
So what about then? Let's stay we're on this topic now. This was meant to be the third topic, but we're on the topic now. Let's stay here. What about if? So I know how real estate agents think a little bit from the amount of time I've spent speaking to them. They're not. Well, there seems to be those who are lawyers, because I've had clients who have degrees in law, and then they've gone into real estate. So there are those who are lawyers and would 100% understand what you're saying and go, okay, that's the way it is. And there are others who are not lawyers, and they think more like, how can I get around this? And I think that's think that's probably a common question. And that's what it's for, isn't it? That's how they think. So So what if you wanted to get around this? Is there a way? Like, for example, if you were coming from Canada is obviously the big example here, or Australia. If you were coming from one of these countries and you had a problem purchasing a property because of the non-existence of the bilateral agreements, could you get around it, for example, by starting a company, or by, are there ways around it? Or, and I understand it's probably a very technical question that you don't want to go too deep into now, but just in brief, are there ways around it that people could investigate?
There might be. I'm a lawyer, as you said, so I cannot really boost the non-compliance. And I see your point. I mean, that's our mindset.
Legally, so, only legally. I'm only talking about legal ways.
I think that actually a very good solution, very common solution and popular one is the setting up of a company. Especially, it depends on why you are effectively committed to the purchase of the property. Because, for example, if that is intended to be a base for your Airbnb or something like that, that's also common in my experience. Then of course maybe it's not relevant if you are buying that under your name, or if you want to set up a company and then handle the revenues, the business through the company. Then the company, basically the nationality of the company depends on the residence of the company. So an Italian company, Italian-based company, would not go through the same issue. So that's quite a common way to do that. Of course, I understand your point, and it might be, and I really actually appreciate you giving me a different perspective, because of course I have my mindset, my experience, and my background. So sometimes it's also very good to have a different perspective and a different point of view to try to rethink of the whole situation. What happens, I think, that mostly is to get a company to purchase the property, and so the owner is not longer the person that is not allowed to have this type of contract.
So if there are any, there probably aren't any now. There probably aren't any Australians or Canadians watching this right now who want to move. But maybe in one of the replays or in one of the, when I chop this up later on and put it on things, if there is anyone watching this who had their dreams crushed, there is hope. Yeah, there is some hope.
There's
yeah,
always
there is some.
hope.
There's always a way. Yeah, especially with Italian law, I found in
Exactly.
my own experience.
I was thinking the same. I was thinking the same. Yeah. There's a common saying in Italian: "Fatta la legge, trovato l'inganno."
And can you translate that for our non-Italian residents, non-Italian viewers?
Yeah, it's like you have the law and then you find a way out. Does this make sense?
In English it would be more like there's always a way around it, or there's always a loophole.
Yeah,
there's always
a loophole. But in terms of the law, really specific to the fact that we're talking about trying to find a loophole to run away from the law. So it's very Italian, right?
I think that's a human thing. I think it's a human thing. I think my experience of going around and living in different places and experiencing different cultures is we have this idea that some places are more corrupt, or this idea that some places don't follow the rules. And in reality, there's not that. It's not always different. It's not always that different.
Of course.
There are different, like there's
we're
corruption
talking about
everywhere.
Creativity, right? We are more, that's creativity, right?
Yeah, so maybe the attitude is different. So Italians might think of it more in terms of how can we be creative with the laws, whereas maybe in the UK people just think like, how can I get around it? And they'll find like what's the alternative. They don't think of it as a creative exercise. Maybe it's not such a game, but it's the same. There's always people want to do what they want to do.
The difference might be the attitude, right? Your more romantic way of being creative or just being very practical, which is more like UK style. So in the end, it's the same result, but
yeah, it's like I said, I've noticed it's something that's people are more similar than they are different. That's especially in Europe. Obviously, the further away you go, the more that's not true. But especially in Europe, we are more similar than we are different. Although I had a very interesting conversation last time I was on live with an agent called Elisabetta, and we started talking about the differences between northern and southern European culture, and that's an interesting discussion, which comes into
Copenhagen,
this whole,
right?
Yeah,
was that Copenhagen?
Yeah, she lived in Copenhagen, and that's an interesting conversation when it comes to drawing a line on different cultural ideas. But let's cycle back let's cycle back before we go too off track. So are there any other? I mean, this just a final question on this thing about buying, not being able to buy property from certain nationalities. Is this a common issue in many EU countries? Are you aware, or is it something that's? I wasn't aware this was a common thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, mostly it depends on the singular country. So single country. So we're talking about Italy and Canada, for example, and that's why I'm saying also that the platform is provided by the Italian government, and so yes, it's between the single countries. Within EU, the fact is that within the EU, so if we're talking about Italy and Germany, for example, the issue doesn't exist just because within the EU borders there is this condition of reciprocity that is per se met.
Sorry, just to be clear, what I meant was, do you know if there are any other countries in the EU that have?
Yes, they do.
They all do. So
they have it. Yeah, exactly. It's a common thing. It just may change the bilateral agreement, so the other country, the counterpart we're talking about.
So maybe that's a good way to then slide into this point about visas, because the reason why I asked that is well, is that the one that comes to my mind? And when we spoke about preparing for this live, it was it was interesting that you made this link, and because I knew this too. I know, for example, that Portugal is the destination that lots of people think of. They have this golden visa, and lots of people know of that. They've heard of it. And if I'm right in saying you can buy a property and get a visa there, that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although I do believe it's changing next year, or it's always changing. These things are always changing.
Correct.
Yeah, but still, I think it's true. Even from next year, you'll still be able to get a visa if you buy a property. It's just harder, or there's more taxes. I think, is that right?
I think it's not going to be the same visas, the golden visas, which was the main one. I think that's not going to be available anymore. But that's Portugal.
Yeah. So you mentioned to me, as I said when we were preparing, that lots of people have this perception. They think, oh, well, then that means they've heard of the Portuguese golden visa and they think it exists for Italy. So why do you? Yes, can you tell me a little bit about that, Alessia? Like, what's the mistake people make here, and how can then agents maybe avoid this or avoid passing on the wrong information?
Good question indeed. There's no equivalence, straight equivalence between buying a property and getting a visa, just like it is in Portugal. So in Italy, does not grant you a visa per se, the fact that you want to buy a property. I know that for a lot of people it may sound not right, just because the intention of investing into a property may seem for them, trying to invest into the country, and so I might be rewarded. That might sound like a common idea, but it's not really like that, because it's also, I think, a way of the perception that Italy has towards real estate, which is something very, very cultural. I think also families are much linked to properties, and that's something that, for example, you in part of the inheritance you have from your family. So probably it might be just the way for government to protect this type of conception. And so what happens for foreigners in Italy who wants to move to Italy is that buying property, renting a property might be something that facilitate your move, but per se it does not grant you a visa. So there are some type of visas that might be applicable, but for sure there's no equivalence between buying property, getting a visa. What I know most is that, of course, the visa. We're talking about visa in terms of immigration routes. So visa, to be technically speaking, is just a document that allows you to travel and come to Italy. But just let's talk about visas in terms of immigration routes. So the visa and the immigration route depends on the specific case. What we have seen most is that, for example, people who are planning to move on a long term to Italy, then they want to purchase a house. And if they're planning to move long term, maybe just to retire to Italy, that's a very common case. People find Italy beautiful, astonishing, and they fall in love and want to retire in Italy. Well, then buying a property in that case, if we're talking about retirement, can effectively support your application for an elective residence visa. So the elective residence visa is the type of, it's not really the golden visa for Italy, but it's a very interesting one if you are planning to stay on a long term and not working in Italy. So in that case, you buy a house, and it's indirectly, it says that you have economic means to stay in Italy, and you have already housing arrangements to stay. So indirectly, you are meeting the requirements in terms of housing arrangements and economic and financial means. But directly, there's no link. So that's just to facilitate your visa application. So that's, for example, a very, very common visa for people who are planning to stay. And in that case, of course, if you're really going directly to the property purchase, then it can facilitate. It doesn't give you the visa, but facilitates. On the other hand,
can I just say on that particular one to ask? Sorry, were you going to say more about that visa, or were you going to just move on to another one?
We can also move to another one.
I have a question about this one specifically. Please. If that's so I've heard just to clarify, then this is specifically for
Yes,
people
please.
if you are retiring to Italy,
Mostly.
you can, I believe there are some, you have to have certain, there are some, what could we say, financial
Yes, requirements
requirements. Yep. So if you tick the boxes for the financial requirements, then buying a property helps the process, and it's part of the
helps.
helps the
Yes.
process. So, but I've heard agents, and this is where I've heard agents tell me this. So I want you to tell me if this is good advice or if this is not good advice
Okay.
to give
Yes.
clients. I've heard agents, for example, say that, because there are different incentive schemes. It's better. There are tax incentive schemes, for example, if you have your residency set up in a small town in
Yes.
certain parts of the country, particularly the south.
Right.
Now, and they've said to me that clients can set up their residency there, but they don't necessarily have to live there. They can also purchase a property, for example, in Milan or Rome if they want to, and that's what people do, or so like what's what they can do. Is that something like, yeah, you can do, you shouldn't really recommend it, or is that something that's perfectly acceptable and common in your experience? It's that
Again,
creativity
yeah,
of the law coming
again,
in. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I'm still speaking to a lawyer, so I try to see both phases. Actually, we're talking about a very specific tax advantage that comes with taking the residency in a specific town hall, with a specific town hall. So residency is the residenza, iscrizione anagrafica, which means that basically you are choosing that specific place as your electing that place as your place of residence, which is not the domicile, legally speaking. So domicile or dwelling is more where you stay in practical terms, but residency has some additional strength and connection to the place. So effectively, if you're just staying in a place, that might be your domicile, and it would not be 100% compliant to the law to also get a residency there if that's not exactly where you always stay, because there's a specific definition of residency in legal terms. And so it is a way out, what you're saying. So it's a way out to get some fiscal benefits, but there should be some consistency, at least. I'm trying just to promote a little bit of compliance, just because I'm a lawyer, so I have this mentality, and
Yeah.
maybe it's a disadvantage, but still, there should be some
Also,
consistency.
I could definitely see. On the other hand, there's also the argument that the whole purpose of this is to bring
Yes,
people into regions which need people. So
yes,
if you're going to take advantage, if you're going to go and live there, you should also. I think that although I do think that's probably quite common. Most people who want to move to Italy, they're not interested in just taking. They want to go there and have an
the
Italian
full.
lifestyle.
Yes,
So they do want to
exactly.
sort of put back into the community in that sense. But actually, just something you've just said there just got me thinking that one thing I would advise. I'm curious to your thoughts on this. I would advise agents to do when talking to a client who's not familiar at all with the Italian system, particularly if they're from the UK. I don't know if this. I don't know how many other countries this applies to. I would imagine it does apply to places like the United States as well. You really need to explain to people what a residency is and what a domicile is,
Yeah, and what
because
nationality sometimes also.
yeah, well, because we just don't have those concepts.
No,
Like,
I know, I
so
know. That's also, for
yeah,
example, Australia. Also, that's also something that happens. So there's a little bit of a background that you have to set up before anything like that, because it might also become difficult in the end to explain. Well, no, this is residency, this is domicile, this is residence permit, which sometimes also got misunderstood in terms of residence permit, residency. But we're talking on two totally different things. It's just that residency is a concept for the Italian law that is linked to just determines where you are living according to the law. And but also there's some effectiveness. But you're right, there is some misunderstanding because it's a legal description, and also sometimes it's difficult just for Italians or non-legal experts to understand. So actually, it's a common mistake, but it's a very very easy to misunderstand these because it's not common knowledge. So residency then becomes also important when it comes to more practical things like ID card, fiscal advantages, taxes. So it's really important to focus on that too. And what you said about coming to Italy, actually, I've seen a lot of clients that just want to experience the Italian way of living. And so they set up residency in a specific place, but they are also interested in effectively live there and just integrate with the society there. So it's a different concept. Sometimes they overlap domicile and residency. Sometimes they don't, but it's still important to pay some attention to that because it will give you, for example, tax advantages, and so very important to know.
Yeah, and just on that subject, even then you just mentioned ID cards, for example, and even that's something that, as a concept, just doesn't work with my mind.
I know,
as a
it's
concept,
passport for you, right?
Well, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think lots of in fact, in Britain, there was a plan to bring in ID cards in I think the mid 2000s, and it was just completely, there was a public outcry. So the whole concept of like, why do I need an ID card? So again, that was just doesn't enter our minds. And again, the same thing with this idea of why do I have to have a place that I legally call my home? Because in the UK, you can legally basically live in any home.
Wherever,
there are requirements. Obviously, you can't just live in any home. You have to, but you don't have to. There's not the same level of. It's just different. It's just very different in terms of registering where you live.
Yeah, you're right. But that comes from the very same difference at the basis of the systems. So civil law. So the systems, the legal systems are totally different, and UK is more practical. So this drives the whole legal system. So you have very different outcomes just because it's the legal system that like hundreds of years ago was founded on a different way and different basis. So that's why we have very different outcomes. And ID cards, actually, I'm asked many times as well, what is the ID card? What is the passport? Why do I have to, as you said, why do I need two documents? And there are two different documents, but still, I understand the different point of view, and it makes sense, your question, actually.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important, particularly if you're dealing with someone from a common law country.
Exactly.
I don't know actually if I don't know if other countries have introduced things more similar to the Italian system. But I know if you're from the UK, there's a lot of differences in regards to this that can cause confusion, and cause confusion with clients if they don't know about it. But before let's move on to another. We were talking about visas, and I went off on an ID card. I was remembering all of that drama. That was a lot of drama getting all that sorted when I had to do that. So for me, it was drama at the time. So what about other visas then? So we've done the elective visas for residency if you're for retiring. But what are the other options for someone who wants to move to Italy?
Very interesting in terms of also a real estate, still talking and still linked to that, is what is supposed to be our golden visa is the investor visa, the investment visa. It's a totally different route. We're talking of a way different process, but this is more focused on the fact that investing into the country can grant you a visa. There are different levels of these. So what the investment is really about makes a lot of difference, because of course, maybe you want to invest in shares, bond, equities, or you want to invest in real estate. And so the outcome again is very different, because then the whole convenience, the whole interest into this type of visa may change. But right now, what we are experiencing is that the investor visa is a quite recent immigration route, and that was set up by the government in a specific and quite limited way of invested into companies. So shares, for example, buying shares, and we're talking about quite a high level investment. So we're starting from 250,000 euros for startups, 500 million, so 500,000 euros in shares. So we're talking about quite a substantial investment. But what we are noticing is that there is a lot of interest still in investing into real estate. So what about investing into companies that whose main business is real estate? That can also grant you a visa. So again, you see that indirectly you can have some type of equivalence between buying property and getting a visa. It's not a straightforward path. It's quite a
It's that creative. It's that creative
yes,
path again, isn't it? Yeah.
again. So we are setting up the investor visa. Actually, didn't really get the attention that the government planned and expected, just because they indeed structure this type of immigration route in a very specific and restrictive way. But we want to be creative, so there are ways to still get a visa through the property. Also, investing, for example, in companies that can give you the final benefit of owning a house, for example, or owning different properties, or having shares of a company that handles, for example, the Airbnb in a specific country, in a specific province, in a specific town hall. So this might be one of the most interesting visas for those who want to invest in real estate, because in that way, again, indirectly, you can get a visa. And the investor visa is very interesting because it's the only one that can give you access to Italy, so actually to the EU, without requiring you to stay in the country for a minimum amount of time, because residency, so getting the residence permit and doing the whole process, makes sense if you plan to stay in the country. But sometimes that's not the purpose. So sometimes you just want access to a specific country, Italy, lifestyle, business, and whatever. And then the investor visa comes in handy, because you just get shares, and from them you get a visa. You have a lot of freedom in terms of movement. You're not fiscal liable if you pay attention to some specific requirements. So that's very important, because something that also a lot of people, I guess, maybe we didn't mention that initially, but I don't know if this is an issue with your clients also in terms of taxes. Like I buy a property, I get a visa, and then am I fiscal liable, tax liable? Normally with the permanent, not just the permanent, but just with the residence permit, then you become tax liable in Italy. So there are a lot of things that you want to pay attention to. So that's why I'm saying a consultant, a lawyer is very helpful, because there are different aspects that you shall pay attention to. Taxes, for example. So real estate, I'm sure that a lot of people ask about taxes connected to the house purchase, but then they don't know also maybe the impacts. And for example, I get residency, and so my taxes are lowered to these because that's going to be my primary residence. Or I just buy a house, then I buy another one, and then that is no longer my home, and then I pay different taxes on that. So that's also something. I don't know. I think that a lot of people ask you question on this side too, but tell me, how is it about really?
I mean, people don't come to me to ask tax advice generally,
Yeah, but maybe okay, that's
but
good.
no, but I have worked with clients to work on explaining these. And luckily, as you're speaking, everything you've been speaking about, I've heard before, I've read before, so I have understood more than I've understood it, and it was right. So it's good. That's good to hear. That's an interesting point. I have had a client before tell me about the investment route, and I think that point as well that you made about this particular route giving you access, but without the requirement, the kind of what's it called, the the requirement to be in the country for a certain amount of time, is a very interesting one for a lot of people, and an important one, because there are, again, Italy is a great place to live and have experienced the lifestyle, but you really need to want to be there if you want to, because otherwise this might be, if you're the kind of person that has €500,000 to invest, plus perhaps you don't necessarily want to be here full time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
but that's an interesting one for those sorts of people.
Also, because
So
if you become a resident, then you get the Italian tax brackets, which are not that competitive. So you won't really that it is worth it many times.
So I just realized we got to 45 minutes, and that was, well, we can keep going if we want anyway. I mean, we can keep going a little bit longer because, well, yeah, if people want to stay, they can stay. But I wanted to ask you, are there any more visas that we haven't discussed? Because I have another question related to rental agreements I wanted to cycle back to. But were there any other big visa issues to talk about, do you think? Anything else
In
people should
terms
be
of real
aware of?
estate, well, in terms of real estate relevance with the topic, I don't think so, because it's more, it's just something that is also important is with the elective residence visa that I didn't really mention earlier about the renting a house rather than buying that. So in that case, that's also still relevant for the elective residence visa, but
So
it
please,
just
can you say
on a
something about
different
that? Because
perception.
I want the final question, the final sort of topic I wanted to make sure we cover before we end was about rental agreements and about renting
Okay.
anyway. So can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So the one that we were talking about earlier, so the elective residence visa that is mostly designed for retired people, just because it's meant to be for a more long-term plan. So that's why I'm talking about pensioners or retirees. And so there are two different ways to comply with the housing arrangements requirement. So because you have to show to the consulate, the Italian consulate abroad, where you will present your visa application, you have to prove that you have also housing arrangements together with financial requirements, which are on a separate level. Housing arrangement can be met through either a property purchase, so you own a property in Italy, and you will elect that as the place where you will live. And on the other hand, there's also the possibility to lease a place, so rent a place, rent a property, which of course satisfies some minimum requirement. But as you can see, that is very important, because a lot of people just think, well, I go to Italy and I have a friend, actually a very dear friend of mine, that is gonna host me and I can stay with them. Well, no, that's not the case for the elective residence visa. You either have to buy a property or just rent it for a minimum of 12 months, because you have to show proof of the fact that you can live on your own means, so financial and economic means. And so you have to rent a place. So that's where renting also is relevant.
And I know you mentioned to me before as well that some Italians, some people think that that's not possible. Is that so?
Yes,
Is it completely? Is it quite possible for a foreigner to come and just rent a property? Are there the same kinds of restrictions that you've mentioned before with the bilateral agreements, or does that not apply in this case?
That's also a very good question, just because a lot of people, well, a lot of people are not very aware of the legislation in terms of renting to a foreigner. But if they are, there are also some misunderstandings in terms of what is possible or not for a person. If you want to rent to a person that does not have a residence permit, which is the permesso di soggiorno, as you may know. Well, the point is that there is a prohibition, so it is forbidden to rent a property to someone who does not have a residence permit. But just when you are promoting illegal migration, so you're boosting illegal migration, and that's the only case where it is forbidden. So if we are talking about normal landlords that just want to have a contract with some foreigners, well, it is possible. It's just that what is not possible is to use that as a way to boost illegal migration, promote illegal migration, because the point here is that basically you are kind of making a bid, because you need housing arrangements before being sure that you're going to get a visa. You need a housing arrangement before being able to file the visa application. So in the end, you have a contract, and maybe you're not going to be able to effectively stay in the place that you have rented. And that this is where it's important also to have a real estate agent to support you with the clauses and, for example, withdrawal terms or notification in terms of withdrawal from a contract. Because in the end, you are filing a visa application and you need to show proof of having a contract, but you're not sure that you're going to get the visa, because it's not a right. It's always the consular discretion. So a lot of people think, well, how can I get a place? Because a lot of landlords are not willing to rent me any place if I don't have a residence permit. And on the other hand, I also understand the landlord who says, well, maybe I rent the place and then the person in 3 months just says, I didn't get the visa, and then I'm not going to get the money. I'm going to lose this opportunity maybe to rent for 4 years. And so there's a lot of different ways to handle this, but still it's important, in my opinion, to have someone who speaks Italian also, because maybe you have seen the same, but a lot of times landlords are more familiar with Italians and so are not very happy to rent to foreigners because they are not sure about the economic means. Maybe they don't trust. That's quite common as far as my experience for Italians. They don't trust foreigners. So that's where a professional, be a real estate agent or a lawyer, that helps in facilitating the conversation between the prospective landlord and prospective tenant. So in this case, I think it's important to be aware of the fact that there is this prohibition, but it's just if you're boosting illegal migration. Other than that, you can lease to foreigners. Sometimes it's very convenient, actually, just because they need to stay for a long time rather than tourists. Of course, that's on another level, I guess. So you get more money if you high season rent a place in Sardinia rather than renting it out for 12 months. But still, depends on the case. It might be convenient anyway.
So I think, just to summarize, a key point there, I think, would you agree with this, that it could be one way that an agent might think about this? So for example, let's just say I'm a real estate agent in Italy and I've got clients interested in renting a place, and that might, for whatever reason, they want to rent. Would you say it's in the interest of an agent to pay close attention to things and like the withdrawal clauses, and to make their clients aware of it, and to ideally, because I know a lot of agents have working relationships with landlords, or that's part of their job if they go around dealing with this, to make sure that steps are in place. And that could also work very beneficially for a landlord if they're aware of this. Because I would imagine if I'm a landlord and I have a property to rent and someone says, I've got this foreign client, and if they're a good client, obviously, and they said, well, they might not get the visa, but either way, you're guaranteed 3 to 6 months of rent whilst they're waiting. And as long as you're very aware of all the terms, I can't see anyone having a problem with that necessarily.
You're right. But on the other hand, I also had clients who were refused and rejected the lease agreement, the rental agreement, just because the landlord was afraid that they were going into something not legal. So
So
that's why it's important.
This is completely legal then, from what I this
is
completely legal.
It is. As long as it's not boosting.
I hope so, because I've rented properties in Italy, so I hope it was legal.
And I've supported a lot of clients to rent them. So yes, it is legal, definitely. So it's just that a lot of people do not know that. And another thing that I want to just mention very quickly is that it's important, if you're renting to a non-EU citizen, that you also comply in terms of cessione di fabbricato, which is a notification to authority that is necessary when you are renting a place or just actually ceding the rights to a foreigner in terms of non-EU citizen. Because normally you have a lease agreement, you register that with the tax agency, so the Agenzia delle Entrate, and with the registration, you immediately, by default, comply with those requirements when it comes to EU citizen. But when it comes to non-EU citizen, so you're renting to a US citizen, then you also have to file the cessione di fabbricato, which is a specific notification to authority saying, I am basically ceding, so just giving away my rights of having this property for me to a non-EU citizen, because they want to track everything. So that's also a very important thing. Maybe real estate agents are not aware, and landlords either, because it's very specific to non-EU citizens. But as you can see, there are a lot of actually points where it's important that real estate agents pay attention to the law, because you are in the end responsible for the transaction. And so, of course, the landlord wants to be sure. So I think it's very interesting that there are some points where paying attention is really worth it, of course.
I have one final question related to this, but we're getting a bit late. Do you have 5 mintes still? I shouldn't take 5 minutes, but
I do.
So related to renting in particular, what about the short-term rental. So I've again, this is me being I'm ignorant to the proper rules on this, but I have seen people in Facebook groups in the comments, people who digital nomads in particular who want to come to Italy, and I've heard people say that you cannot rent, or should I say, an Italian landlord cannot rent on a short-term contract for more than 30 days to a foreigner. Is that the case, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Just because it depends on the type of contract also. So if we're talking about a touristic, but in terms of touristic lease agreement, so for the purpose of tourism, then yes, that is correct. But still, then it depends. If we're talking about digital nomads, maybe that's not the case because it's not really tourism. So it is something that it's important. The deadline of 30 days is actually something very important to consider, especially if you're doing that on your own and not, for example, through a platform. So real estate agent is in between, but no platform, because sometimes Airbnb or other type of platform do have some filter on that. But it may make some difference in terms of what is the type of contract, transitory lease agreement for uso abitativo, as you know, or other type of use that is relevant on legal terms.
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard this is obviously one of those areas where I imagine there are. I won't say it now, but I imagine there are very easily there are ways to go around this quite easily if you wanted to. But what about someone? I'm not thinking about someone trying to get around it. I'm thinking about someone just either an agent or also just maybe a tourist or a digital nomad who wants to make sure they stay within the rules. So if you are, just to clarify, so if you are a tourist, if coming as a tourist, and that's what you're coming as, whether you're going to do other things or not is another question. But if you're coming as a tourist, if a real estate agent or a landlord offers you a place to stay for, say, 3 months, that's probably not allowed. Is that right? That's not allowed.
You have to another type of lease agreement, another type of contract, so rental contract. It is allowed. It's just a different type.
Yeah, and is that quite simple to do?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of maybe I have my perspective and my experience that makes it easier, but I don't think is something that cannot really be overcome. So
I say this because I've seen people advising other people on various groups for this kind of thing. Just stay at a place for 30 days and then go to another place, not just to get around the rules, but just because they've said it's too much. There's too much, too much paperwork for the 2 or 3 months.
It really depends on what is the purpose. So sometimes it's not worth it to do it for more. Right. So if we are talking about a contratto di breve durata, so it is per se must be short. So sometimes you just say, well, no, I'm sticking to 30 days and go away. If there's other types of convenience, it's just like the previous example we were saying. Well, I don't want to lease to people who are foreigners just because it might not be convenient. On the other hand, you can say, well, better this than nothing. So really depends. In my idea, it's not that impossible. It might not be convenient, depending on the case.
All right, then. So, okay, Alessia, we've come to almost an hour, so this is my longest live stream yet. Well done. Do you have any final comments or thoughts? Anything you think we missed? Anything you want to add?
No, I think we've touched a lot of points and talked about a lot of things. So getting a professional involved is really important, as you can see, to avoid.
That was my next point. Can you tell us then why should someone get a professional involved? Like, how could you specifically an agent here, or someone who thinks they know a bit but doesn't know everything? In what ways could you help them navigate these issues?
Well, it really depends. There are so many mistakes that can be done during the path. Immigration, real estate, compliance with both things, interests to be protected, because maybe there is something that the standard way of doing is not really the most appropriate way to do that, or the most convenient way to do that. So I think that having someone who has an overall knowledge of topic might be not just in terms of compliance, but also convenience, economically speaking, to find the best way to do that. And also, I mean, there are hourly rates, there are services rates, so fees. So it's way worth it to be prepared rather than having to be sanctioned, having a fine, or just getting themselves involved into a contract, into commitments that are not really very worth it.
You definitely don't want to be someone who sold a property to someone and advised the client to come over, bring their family over, get set up, and then find out that they can't stay, because they're not going to give you very good I mean, I wouldn't give someone a very good review. No, and real estate agents really do work on referrals. You know, they work on that a lot. You know, and yeah, I mean, that's quite an extreme case. But the fact that you've said it's happened more than once is worrying, because you're not the only lawyer. You know, there's I imagine there's more lawyers, but you've seen this happen more than once. So that's worrying to me.
So
but
that initial example still is relevant and still stays in place for getting everyone warned about the importance of referring to some professional.
It's the extreme example, but that's like a nightmare. Most people would just make a mistake, have to pay a fine, you know, and paying fines in Italy actually is not actually that bad, I would say, because it's not like they don't come knocking on your door with, like, you know, the police don't tend to come knocking on your door. It tends to be much more like you speak to someone and you find out, oh, by the way, you had this fine to pay, and you go, what do you mean? Oh, now it's more because you didn't pay it fast enough. It's more of a frustration. Right. It's more frustrating rather than people coming knocking on the door. That's been my experience.
Anxiety also, so you just don't want those feelings.
You don't want it, no. But this is a more extreme thing that people should try to avoid. So, okay, Alessia, let's end it there. So we'll end the stream. So thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge of everyone. And let's end it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Grazie.